force can have a strong influence on the weak-minded. I'm using that quote because of today's guest, who I know is a big Star Wars fan. And if I had it right, I believe that was Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we may not be Jedi, but we're all influenced by fear, self-doubt, and by the noise of the world. And today on the Bare Essentials podcast, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Dustin, the Dean of Zen, Dean. He's the founder of Mindmax, and we're going to talk about the real power behind the curtain, and that's your mind. Dustin, how you doing?
Charles, hey man, thank you so much for having me on. I'm just so pumped to be here. And you know what? We started off right like we would. We didn't have this plan, but I've got my Star Wars Empire Strikes Back shirt on. And you know what? We're gonna build strong on the force. And yeah, we're gonna talk about that power in us and brain fitness is approach I use at the Mindmax Institute. The natural state of the brain is fearful. It identifies threats. That's what keeps us alive. It's continually scanning to see what's going to hurt us or who's going to make fun of us. And people go, I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner with over 24 years experience, mainly at one of the largest um, healthcare facilities in the Midwest, and also a nursing professor of mental health and a psychotherapist, and I've done medication management. And the thing about it is that brain fitness is where it's at, in my opinion, because at the end of the day, medications even us out. Okay. And therapies give us a base to build on to kind of process through our hurt. But at the end of the day, we have to train our brain to process our life through our power and potential rather than our pain and our past. And it literally is fitness, just like our bodies.
Mm.
It takes that repetition, for every negative thought we need to counter it with at least three amazing things about us. And that's how the force becomes very strong in regards to mental wellness.
I love it. And I think you gave me a great segue into this first segment here that I am calling the mindset versus mental tricks. So, Dustin, what's the biggest misconception people may have about the work that you do?
I would say the biggest misconception is the power individuals have over their mental health. The pain in the past is so focused on in this field of work. Okay, processing through and going through it. And it's very important up to a point. But once you reach a certain point where you have no locus of control over what's gone on in the past, it has to be a movement from therapy, in my opinion, into coaching, into actually being solution focused. And what do I have control over right here and right now? I can't change what's hurt me or who's hurt me back there. But the way I respond to that and the way I process that and what I put my energy and my attention towards in the here and the now, that's where the power lies. And realizing that we can do it. There is hope. So much to do with mental wellness feels like a prison, and it feels like I'm just stuck here and I can't get out. But realizing that a lot of that is coming from that fight or flight untrained brain, that brain that is doing what it's supposed to in regards to keeping us alive.
Mhm.
But we need to take that next step and have it start helping us thrive.
I love that. The whole having it help us thrive. I think that's so important. And I think it leads me into this because when I think about our brains thriving, and you mentioned it earlier, but just like our physical bodies and our conditioning, right? How do you explain to people the real value of mindset training? Because I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's one of those areas that people can't really see it. There may not be the tangible that's right there in front of them, So what are the barriers and how do you help explain it to show them the true value in it?
I think similar to kind of how I started the show is understanding first and foremost what we consider negative and depressed is the base is one of the base states of our mind, and not in a bad way. The mind is looking at the negative. It's looking at what can hurt you. A good example is news. Okay. News is all about making money through the sponsors, right? So they know that the base mindset of individuals is fear. So the majority, 90%, I think statistics say, of news is negative, trauma, war, strife, political arguments, and all those things, because they know most people haven't trained their brain to be attracted to and identify the beautiful things and the positive things. You have to work out. You have to do the repetition of feeding that mind all the amazing things, specifically the amazing things about you,
Mhm.
because the mind sees all the things that make you vulnerable, and it does it to protect you, but in essence it destroys your joy. And joy optimization is something that I really stress and that I want people to realize. Just like working out, if you want that muscle, you've got to do the reps, you've got to do those curls, and it's going to hurt and it's not going to feel natural.
Mhm.
And I think that's what so many people, and even the way the system's been set up, it's set up for people to try to find what's wrong with their mind instead of treating it like another muscle or treating it like another opportunity to work out and work through its natural state. The body's natural function is to store energy. How does it store energy? It stores energy in lipids, fat. So if you eat and eat and eat and you don't work out, that's natural, but that's not healthy. And people get it with the body. They get the importance of, running a lot to get their cardio up, doing those reps to get their muscles up. But when it comes to their mind, they just think that, it's just broken, it's just damage. And I'm not saying there are chemical elements to it, and obviously therapy and medications and all those things definitely have their place, and I've practiced in that, still do at times. So this is not to be negative, but I think that we do have a lot more control over what we can do for our mental wellness through brain fitness and brain training than people understand.
Yeah, that was I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the detail you went into there because you and I usually when I'm doing the interviews, I'm listening along the way I'm listening, but I don't fully process everything until I go back. One of my favorite things to do, Dustin, is after the interview to just go back and play it and listen to it as somebody who just hears it. And I was already could tell during that answer that there was a lot in that to unpack, and I'm looking forward to that part of it. Well, you did touch on that, and I think for this next segment here, you were touching on the mental conditioning. I wanted to get into a little bit mental conditioning for real life and how can that mental conditioning help someone in a high stress job or leadership role? So is there is there one habit or belief that you see most often holding people back in that area?
Fear.
Mm.
Fear, and I think one of the biggest things, especially for successful people, is this idea that wearing themselves out mentally and operating out of fear and stress and these it has to be so intense all the time. They While you're climbing up, just like training your brain or training your body, there's some pain at first, but as you get stronger, the pain's not there as much and you can handle more. But I found with a lot of the high performing individuals I've worked with and successful people, that when they reach that top, they think that the value is in that stress and anxiety and that depleting of themselves that got them there, especially from a mental and emotional state. And they won't let go out of fear. They don't stop and look at things out of fulfillment. They don't look at that they've arrived and that the value is actually in them. Yeah, they worked hard to get there, but those skill sets and those talents and those, the knowledge that they learned, that's the value, not the fear, not the worrying about, working 80 hours a week or whatever, and trying to help people undo the that mindset is extremely challenging because it's ingrained in us throughout society because obviously business wants you to be 1,000,000% invested in the business. So there's so much fear around you have to be anxious. You have to work 80 hours a week. You have to be stressed.
Hmm.
And what's an interesting concept about this whole thing is the more that you cling to continuing when you've arrived, say if you're a CEO or an athlete at their top of the game, like some of the people that I've worked with, have arrived and you don't realize the fulfillment from it, imposter syndrome sneaks in, which is really strange because your mind is fatigued. You start to say, this is all a show. I don't even belong here. I'm not good enough to be here. And I cannot stress and just say, how shocking it is. Some of the people I've worked with who are beyond brilliant and successful, and that I don't deserve this. I don't belong here. I'm an imposter. How much that comes up. And
Hmm.
I really believe that it is from fatigue and from trying to operate out of fear instead of fulfillment. And I think a big aspect, even at the top levels of things, is implementing fun.
Hmm.
I think that when you're successful, you think that it all was because you were serious. And the higher you go, you feel like you have responsibilities for other people and stuff. But once you step back and realize I've arrived and it's because of the gifts and the hard work I've done and the knowledge I've obtained, I'm pretty fun and I now deserve to have fun. Okay. And then that will actually start to trickle down to your employees. So many times people are worried, well, I got to set a good example. Well, why not set a good example of brain fitness and mental wellness rather than an example of selling yourself to the business or selling yourself to fatigue, anxiety, fear, and eventually imposter syndrome? That's not a message you want to send to your employees. And this is one thing at Mindmax that I'm really excited about is that I've started conducting, it's called Mindmax Institute, cohorts, so group education,
Hmm.
that's based on a community where individuals interact with each other, because I found in my individual coaching sessions people were doing so well, but that's kind of just hitting them. When you get into an area where there's a whole core cohort of people taking these skills and starting to train their brain to thrive rather than just survive, it can really have an impact. And right now, a lot of the focus has been on teachers because there's our teachers are like, they're the foundation of our society. They're building those next generations, and they're fatigued and their brains aren't fit. And in regards to mental and emotional wellness, and it's really been a rewarding opportunity, and I'm excited for it to grow.
Yeah, that sounds like well, doesn't even sound like it's definitely needed because I think I'm finding out now in my 50s that, when it comes to my clarity and my peace of mind, it's kind of now my biggest non-negotiable, and it was never like that before. I had recently put so much emphasis on, obviously I had to do the work to get physically take my health back. But now that I've gotten my physical health back, my mental clarity and my mental health are extremely important. And, As you were talking about that, I wanted to ask you this because I think society really paints the picture of the grind as it's lack of a better word, it's sexy, right? The grind. Everybody, I'm grinding, I'm grinding, I'm grinding. And I think it's ironic that grind, it rhymes with mind. And how come
Love it.
in reality, it's probably the grind is probably worse for you mentally than it can ever be physically. Do you agree with that?
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. And I'll tell you, it doesn't just damage you, it damages others.
Mm.
Okay. Because people are so proud of the grind, but then they also feel like it gives them an excuse to be short with their kids or be short with their wife. I'm grinding here. I'm trying so hard here. And, you know, it comes with that, but there's a pride and a permission that comes with the grind. And once you step out and realize there's times when work needs to get done, that's true. But it doesn't have to victimize you. It doesn't it can be fulfilling. You know, I use the example that lots of times when I'm interacting with people of the Incredible Hulk. Okay, and the way Hulk, all he does is when he's Banner, he's all stressed out and only focusing on, changing the world through his intellectual knowledge, and he hates Hulk and he can't stand the strength and the out of controlness, the animalisticness of Hulk. And when he's Hulk, he can't stand Banner's weakness. Okay. And I think that that's something that a lot of us go through, especially high achieving individuals, is we can't find that balance. Well, the beautiful thing is, and anybody that's a Marvel fan knows that in Endgame, he becomes Professor Hulk. And it's the balance of both. And it's that point where, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, really it's a step in mental wellness. Mental wellness became the priority, and the grind is done. You know what? He doesn't mind taking the picture with those little kids. He has time for the things that matter. And when you get your brain fit and you're operating out of fulfillment rather than fear, and processing life through your power and potential rather than your pain and your past, and you start looking towards hope rather than victimization and helplessness, things change.
Man, I love the way you said that, Dustin. I mean, as you were saying it, I'm thinking about just, even yesterday for me, and I mentioned this to you a little bit, like multiple projects going on at once. And I could tell like mentally, I love doing the podcast and I love these conversations, but I say to people all the time, sometimes there's a price for these conversations, and I'm okay with the price of sometimes the topics are heavy. Um, and I'm in now with writing a book that I'm super proud of, but it's definitely it's dark and the themes are dark.
Mm.
And it was time for me to kind of get back to some of my roots again for what else matters to me. And that's, you know, creating in a way that maybe has value for younger kids. And I think everybody needs that outlet. And I think you touched on it some within that answer. In this next segment, I think this will really get a lot of people focus, distraction, and mental strength. So, how do you help people? Because I think a big deal is, and I don't even know if maybe I'm ashamed to say it because part of this podcast and what I do is probably contributes to this, but digital distraction. How is that impacting us, our mental fitness?
You know, I know that I get a lot of probably people that I hope I don't lose people here, because I'm actually an advocate for electronics and technology and where we're at. I really view it as a tool, just like a knife. You can use it to stab someone, or you can use it to cut food and feed people, and I think that technology, electronics, there's studies we see the studies of the negative impact on people's mental and emotional wellness. There are studies that show like the positive impact that gaming and virtual reality and all these things can have on the mental wellness, especially people that have a seasonal affective disorder and virtual reality taking you to a beach somewhere where things are real and getting you into, different spots, it can have a lot of positives. So what I say is balance. And what I say is what a lot of our society has come to, I think, is operating out of fear and always worrying about what's going to be the block to getting me where I need to be, rather than training your brain to see what brings you fulfillment. And then once you understand yourself, and you understand areas where you can get addicted or areas where you're taking it too far, you then can start to, because you're not operating out of fight or flight, you're really starting to operate out of thrive rather than survive. So you can see those areas where maybe you're starting to lean towards the survival mode and getting addicted and spending, 10 hours playing video games, or having your phone watching awesome TikTok things till 2 in the morning. It's the things we know we shouldn't do, but we want the out that the technology and the electronics are the problem instead of brain fitness being the problem. And it's the same with social media. I've worked years in child and adolescent psychiatry, and so many times social media has such a negative impact on young people, but a lot of it is that the skill set that they need hasn't been emphasized.
Mhm.
And realizing that the value comes from within you, not externally. One of the biggest poisons, I think, that's happened in our society over the years is thinking that the value comes from outside sources and other people, and people do not see the value in them. One assignment I give, like lots of my clients right off the bat, is 50 amazing things about you. And it can't have to do with anybody else. It can't have to do with your pets. And it can't have to do with how you serve others, specifically about you. And I've had so many clients just like really get upset at me. And because people are so used to getting their fulfillment and their self-esteem from external places, and it's a way we're conditioned, grades and coaches, and I'm not saying that we have to operate within a community, but first you have to have that foundation of what is amazing about me, because that's really at the end of the day the only locus of control you have. Really, you only have control over what you know about you and how you respond to stimuli in regards to that. What are my gifts? How do I love me? So hopefully that kind of answered the question. I know that was a lot, but
No, it did, and I like the different take on it, honestly, because I think if that ever comes up in conversations I have, it's, the digital that's always looked at negative. I don't think we ever really talk about the flip side of it. Can it be positive? And is there underlying factors that really, to your point with the knife, that really aren't as much to blame about the digital aspect, but it's more about our own mental state. No, I thought that was really, really good. And when you were mentioning about that exercise you do, um, I think in my experience, and I know I kind of went through this myself, was in a weird way, as much as it was about, in order to even be able to accept and think about what was good about me, I really had to dive deep and first accept kind of just all the shit, right? All the things that I was wrong, so that I could sift through it, change the behavior, and then start to unpack what it was kind of hiding about me. And I think most likely for
Hmm.
you, a lot of your clients, they're probably in their minds are going through the same thing. If you asked me that, I would have went through years ago. I'm like, I would have been Dustin. I have to figure out first the 50 things that I hate about myself right now, and they all come to my mind before I have to get through that part before I can ever start to think about all the good stuff. So I think that's a great exercise you're doing with people, and I
Do you
can
know,
see why it causes trouble.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
That's
interrupt,
okay.
but um, and you're exactly right. And that's why I do the 50 positive things, because do you know why you think you have to work through those negative things first?
Do I know why? I no, I didn't know. No, honestly, I didn't know. Look, listen, the one thing is you get to know me better, and people who watch the show will know about me. I'm very probably linear, right? I just know when there's something wrong, and I'm very accepting of what's wrong. And one thing I've always been good at is this. I've never put blame on anybody else. Anything about my life, whether it was my weight or any of it. I always look first at me. Like I always knew I was overweight because I chose to eat bad and do whatever I wanted, right? So to your point though, I won't sit here and say to you like, "Oh yeah, I know why." I don't know why. I just it felt like I had to do it.
Yeah. Well, but I think that so it kind of goes back to this is part of the reason it's hard is and this is why I like groups too, because everybody feels like that negative has to be worked out before they can find that positive. And I think it comes from a lot of systems. I think there's a lot of um, emphasis on not loving you from a lot of institutions and a lot of ways we've grown up. And I think especially some of us that are Gen X, we had coaches that would, kind of cut into us. And I think there could be positives from that, but a lot of negative came out, and accountability is key. And really, like you just mentioned, that's the only way we get better. But what I've found is I don't think you're alone in that you feel like you have to process through the negative first. I think that's the majority. Because the brain instantly goes to what's wrong with me instead of what's right with me. What's right with me is that's the workout, that's the hardness, because it comes back to that base state of the mind that it's going to see everywhere where you're weak. Now, it is, it's accountability is extremely healthy, that you took accountability and that you wanted to find all those things and you didn't blame someone else, because that's like kind of the lower, if you will, lower step of the mind, that instead of being accountable, I I blame everybody else for what's going wrong with me. But that next step, I think seeing all the negative is what gets us to kind of start to survive and maybe start to have a little bit of a good life, but really to start thriving is to find those amazing things about us, even though our mind says, I can't move forward until I look at all this negativity, because that's what the mind loves.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And I'll end this part with this. I got to a point where I realized this. I was finding more things that I didn't like, and it was becoming super easy to find things that I didn't like. And I have this saying now that I use when I talk to people about things is this. It came down to this kind of simple exercise for me. People talk about in order to improve, sometimes you have to find your why, right? And
Yes.
what I ended up realizing, and I use this when I talk to people now, is I say, that's great. I said, but for me, in order to find my why and to stop going into all those negatives, I had to realize one important thing. I was the why not. I was the only reason that was preventing me from achieving all these things that I should be seeing in myself and that others should be seeing in me. I was the guy that had the wife and the kids and the family, and I was the one preventing myself from potentially being around for them. I was the why not. And Dustin, once I realized ultimately that I was the why not, it became less about me picking out all these individual aspects. And I just said, I want people to know that I'm a good person and that I have these talents. And the only thing that will prevent that from happening and from me understanding that I have those is me. I don't have to look at the negative anymore. So that was an
Yeah,
exercise that I got to that helped me kind of sort out my shit, so to speak.
the force
So
was strong with that move. I'll tell you that much. The force was strong with that move.
yeah, thank you. It took a lot,
Yeah,
man. But listen, I'll say this to you. I think back then, look, I would have never reached out for help or looked to somebody like you, right? So I say this now to people. I may have made it through it and come out on the other end, but I don't suggest the way I traveled. I honestly won't. I love part of my mission on this podcast is to have people like you on so people can understand they're not alone and that
yeah,
there's actual resources out there that can help them process this information and what they perceive about themselves in a way that's way healthier than probably the way I did it. Like I think I'm an outlier. I could have went either way, right? I fortunately made it through, but I hope people see this today and they're looking to reach out to you. So, but yeah, no, that was a great session. And I mentioned about some of the stuff I like to do. Now I wanted to get into this with you because I think it's an awesome thing you're doing, but what's the overall mission of what you're doing now?
joy optimization.
Mm.
I mean, like really helping individuals. But now, Mindmax Institute, really, I want to have a larger reach. And that's why the group cohorts of this brain fitness I'm hoping to reach more people. And with teachers it's a great opportunity because you're reaching them, you're reaching the kids, you're reaching the parents, and you're changing society. And really that's, at the end of the day, and the other thing I like about coaching rather than therapy is I went through abuse in the past, and I was raised in a trailer. I always tell people, it's pretty much a miracle that the kid that was raised in poverty in a trailer in a logging community in Washington State is now having this great blessing of
Mm.
being able to tell people that, you know what, you can do this. Like there is hope and you can thrive rather than just survive. And but what I didn't like about working in therapy, and I still do psychotherapy sometimes in the medication management and the traditional practice, but what I like about coaching is the results, and that I can go on the journey with the people, and that I can be real, and I can be solution focused, and I can share some of what I've been through too and let them know there is hope. In therapy there's so many boundaries, and because of the regulations and insurance and all these things, you're really like stuck in the therapy and just kind of listening and not really somewhat guiding, but not really coming up with a whole lot of solutions. And that's what MindMax Institute has been amazing with, is I get to go on the journey with people, and now the actual, like, groups of people. And then we have a Discord community where the 25, we all interact there, and any questions can come. And if people are getting stuck on something, I will answer, and if need be, I can hop in a VC, a voice channel, and we can talk about it, and I think just a continually evolving state with masses number of people where they're starting to really train their brains to process things through their power and potential rather than their pain in their past. And it's really a superhero lab, in my opinion. Like that
Love
is
that.
really what I feel like
Love that.
MindMax is, and what I have had the ability to do is all of us have superhero strength and superhero abilities in us. We just don't see it. I always I like to use the Marvel movies because I really think they do a good job in showing the human side along with with the superhero side and Tony Stark's anxiety, man. I mean, it led to Civil War. Like he was so afraid about, he wanted that shield around the earth, okay, because of what happened. Lots of things that happened to him in the past all came together to the point that he was willing to fight with some of the people he cared about the most out of his fear and and freedom from that and once there's a recognizing that, hey, I don't have to operate out of this fear. Let's tap this superhero and let's let Professor Hulk take over. Let's let the balanced, amazing person, brilliant and strong person take over because we all have it in us, but it's buried deep for a lot of people.
Man, you're talking my language there. You really are. I post about it sometimes myself, but I always talk about, this alter ego in a way. And I always show, you know, I tell the story to people. They ask me all the time, like, what? The bare essentials, like, why? Right? And this story is this for anybody who hasn't heard it is my family, my kids refer to me as bear. And I accept it though that I know it wasn't because they saw me as a really strong human being. They didn't mean anything by it, but they looked at me and they saw me that I was soft and cuddly like a teddy bear. So I
I love
went
it.
I went with that alter ego and I wear it now proudly in this podcast. And now I show that now I am what that bear needs to be for my family. And apologize in advance to people. And I know I sometimes have a potty mouth and on my post, but honestly, my tagline now is unleash your fucking roar. And that's what I want people to
Yes.
do because stop holding it in because I was so
Yeah.
guilty of holding it in. And, one thing what you described there, though, that I think is amazing, and I wanted to ask you this now, is because I had this discussion a few weeks ago with somebody, but like a lot of us, we post online and we gear everything towards helping people that are in pain or they're damaged now as adults, right? So last year when I wrote the kids' book, Kuro the Bear, I said, you know what? What if I put this character and made it almost like my LinkedIn posting in stories for kids? Maybe we can get to kids before they travel that path and they get so effed up the way a lot of us unfortunately became. So, you with the teachers, how do you frame it for the teachers to make sure this is getting down to the kids?
Well, I think first and foremost, exactly like you said, if we can get early on, and that's why my focus is really trying to help people process things through their power and potential rather than their pain in their past, because what it comes down to is that when we're kids, our life is a lot about that power and potential. Even when hurt and everything, kids are so resilient. And my years in child and adolescent psychiatry, you just see all the hope and all the excitement and how they see the world. And then as things start to get chipped away, that really that fight or flight brain takes over and we lose it. So I think there's a couple things that are important. First of all, empowering those kids and letting them know how amazing they are and that it's okay to love all those things. So often in multiple facilities, education, religion, I think a lot of things, so much emphasis is put on taking care of everybody else and that you're only a good person, you're only as good as how you serve others. Now, I'm not saying that serving others isn't important, but first and foremost, your energy has to go into loving you. First and foremost, your energy has to see you're a person too. You know, you have to go from the beautiful, amazing things that are in you before you can even take that first step to care about others. But what happens is from early on, the only emphasis is about take care of everybody else, which then gives kids the idea that the value comes from what they can contribute to other people and how other people react to them, instead of realizing this goodness is an overflow that goes to others. This goodness in you, this beauty in you, this fun in you can be shared, but you have to identify it, focus it, nurture it first, and then it overflows, instead of trying to push it out and then feel like the flow comes externally instead of flowing internally outward.
Yeah, no, there's again, I can't wait to listen to this because I think there's a lot to unpack there that I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to listening to it, not from a host perspective, but from just from an audience perspective, because I think there's a lot of value in what you're saying there. And one of the reasons I brought it up is there near my wife and I, we have a local diner near us called Metro Diner. We love to go there when we get a chance, just her and I. That's kind of our thing, our date thing.
Awesome.
And again, I have no sponsors or make money, but Metro, if you're listening, I'm open. I'm there a lot. So
I love
um
it.
but
That's awesome.
might as well give it a shot, right? But anyway, I'm bringing it up because we were there a couple weeks ago. True story, Dustin. It was crowded, so we got put in one of those tables where you're kind of there. It's you and me and my wife, but we're literally like right next to the family of four with like that much space between the tables. So the kids, younger kids, a boy and a girl, and they're kind of going back and forth as kids do. And my wife and I couldn't believe this. The dad told the son, I swear on my life, he said this to the son. Now, picture what is going to happen here. He said, hey, I told you, boys don't have emotions. They use their reasoning. Don't get angry in public here. Literally told this kid that. And this little boy just like looked at him and put his head down. And I could see that the kid's head was ready to pop off because now, and listen, no, he was a little older, and then the little girl was just hitting at him and taking his, like, I could understand why he was getting upset, but he didn't even correct the little girl. He just made it like, you do that. Now I was kind of like, man, that's
Oh
going to
yeah.
be a problem. And, I was just like, even my wife, we were kind of like, I said, listen, I'm all for emotional intelligence, but like there's a different way to handle that. But it's just I think parents and as adults, we need to do a better job of what we let our children see and the messages we teach them. But like I said, I think you are doing extremely valuable work. Now this one question before, and you're not getting off the hook real easy. I think you've seen some of the latest episodes. I got this new round called Rapid Fire that I can't wait to go through with you. But before we
Let's
get
go.
to Rapid Fire, um, what I wanted to ask you is this, and, and this wasn't on my question list. I just thought about this as we were talking.
Awesome.
That 50 questions you give for 50 traits that you love about yourself, right?
Yes.
What's the advice or what's that? How do you get people? What do you say to people to kind of just to do it? Because like you would tell me that, I'd say you're crazy. I can't give you 50. What do you tell people to, how do you tell them to work through that exercise?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it. It's actually part of the coaching process, and I don't want to give away the whole system right
That
now, but
that's fair.
but it is the challenge of it. There's lots of opportunity for growth and discussion in the anxiety and the stress that the challenge of it alone causes individuals. And so yeah, just the overwhelming thing, it's kind of an assessment tool in itself where the individual is, because some people just break down, and I'm always supportive, and we work through this. Like, this is a journey together. I'm not like, okay, well then fine if you don't know. This is a hard thing, but most people don't think that. Most people think, you know what? That's pointless. I could do that in a second. But what I want to work on is where I'm bad. I want to work on where I need growth. No.
Mm,
Yeah. The way you're reacting shows where you need growth. If you can't come up with these 50, then let's do it together. Let's find some techniques of how we can come up with the 50. And then to just kind of get a little more into the coaching process, how this thing works, is the point of this is it's part of the brain fitness tool for the individual. The brain will continually identify the threats and the negative. Okay. For every negative that the brain throws at you, you grab three of those things from your list that are specifically about you to counter that. And as you consistently go through that repetition of accessing your 50, first of all, coming up with your 50 and accessing that 50, your superpowers, getting those superpowers and using them against, I don't even want to say against, using them to train the mind to think the way it should, rather than in the base state to strengthen the muscle. There's nothing wrong with, flabby biceps. They're there, but like, you want them strengthened. So you have to counter it with resistance. The three things are the resistance, but they have to be from you.
mm,
Because if you're countering those thoughts with, oh, I have a great wife, I have a great dog, heaven forbid, but what if they die?
mm.
You
Okay.
know, and so many people, because of that conditioning, because of the scenario where, your sibling or other students or other people have more value than you, that's the message we're continually taught, and we embrace it, because we don't want to be prideful and we don't want to be humble. And I'm not talking about that. Okay, what I think people need to realize, though, you have to see yourself as the best, but do not see yourself as better. The toxicity comes in comparison to others. When I'm putting myself on a scale that compares me with other people, that's a problem. We're told, don't be prideful, don't think you're the best. No, think you're the best.
Mm.
Love who you are. Look at those things. But when you're putting someone else down, when you think you're better, that's where the problem arises.
I love it. Love it. And as you were going through it, I was literally thinking in my head, I'm like, like I look at myself as I'm two kind of mental beings in one person that are always somewhat I wrote something before that said my emotions exist as a force within me, always to see which one will win me. And I feel like that's kind of my, what I go through on a daily basis. And you can't see this right now on camera, but I wish this would have got caught on camera. When you mentioned about the dog, my German Shepherd Klaus, when you mentioned what if they die, he popped his head up and just walked out of the room. So I don't know if he understood what you said there, but he just
Oh my
left the room.
Well,
Um,
and sometimes I'm brutal.
yeah,
I know that that's direct with a lot of people, but
it's true though.
it's the truth. You have to, your foundation has to be in a locus of control that's based in you. Because at the end of the day, that's all we have.
Yeah.
This little kid that you're talking about, that his dad's belittling him and he's causing emotional damage, uh, he's got to love himself,
Mm,
because we're not guaranteed. Um, I particularly had horrible parents. At the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, they went through their stuff too, and that's a process too. But sometimes there's horrible people. And I spent a lot of years trying to figure out my part in that. And
mm,
I finally had to go, no, their stuff is their stuff. There's value in me without being the child of my parents.
Amen. Amen to that. I listen, I feel fortunate growing up with the parents I've had. And when I hear people, I feel bad, but I'm glad to see you here on the other side and doing the work you're doing because I really think it's valuable. And I'm super pumped. Honestly, we just connected recently. I'm so excited that you're part of my circle now, and I look forward to beyond this podcast, just, following you along on your content and your journey. I look forward to that. So, all right, now maybe we have a little fun here, a little rapid fire round here. So,
Let's do it, Charles. I'm ready. And once again, thank you so much for bringing me on. This has been great. I think, we connected right off. I could have talked hours with you the other day, and this is just great. So fire away. Let's go.
all right, well, I have to start with this one, and
Do I need my lightsaber back there
you
before?
probably for the first question, right off the bat, what's the best Star Wars movie?
Oh my God. Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
I don't know if it really is, but it has the biggest impact on me. I remember when it first came out and there was like the span of some years, I can't remember how, 83, I was like 7 or 8 years old, and the line was wrapped all the way. I was in Washington State. We drove into Olympia, Washington, and the theater that was playing it, the line was wrapped around the theater like 3 times. So I'm Return of the Jedi. I love it. It's the one that resonates the most with me, and I like the end. I always like that resilience wins, that hope wins at the end of the day. But
Mm,
once again, and I think there's an element of truth with Return of the Jedi in that Luke had to believe in him, and he had to believe in the Force. And no matter, you know, you he didn't have a dad, and I think he desired a dad most of his life. And then he found out that his dad's the most evil guy in the universe. What do you do then? The good has to come in you. I actually teach a class on Guardians of the Galaxy 2 that pretty
oh,
much
nice.
has the same message about, you think all your problems is because you don't have a dad. Then you meet him, and it's him himself is another problem. So, what do you have? And to go back to, like you said, you had a good upbringing, you had good parents. I That's beautiful when that happens. And I love that. But I also want people to know that, like, I had some amazing influences in my life that weren't genetically attached to me.
Mm,
And for a long time, and this is kind of a similar message as Guardians of the Galaxy 2, for a long time, I put an asterisk by the impact they had on my life because they weren't my parents, or they weren't family. But now, like, they are family, and they are that power that gave me. And it doesn't matter that my blood's not the same as them. They love me just as much.
yeah, I say to people all the time, that's to me one of the most it's the biggest fallacy I've ever come across. Like I said, I'm fortunate to have the parents I have, but in people I speak with like you, and I hear you say that the whole blood is thicker than water is not, it's not true, not at all. I mean, I think, and I'm glad to hear that you had that. All right, so now this one's a bit of a multi-part one.
Right.
Favorite Star Wars hero?
Oh, Luke, by far.
Okay. All right. Favorite Marvel hero?
Oh my God. That one's tough. I love Stark. I love Tony Stark. Like,
Okay.
that's,
All
you
right.
know,
Now the hardest part.
okay.
Who wins, Luke or Stark?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Totally Luke.
Okay.
Totally Luke. Um, what I love about what I love about Tony is I think that a lot of his journey is similar to mine. I don't think my journey is similar to Luke's, but Luke's is what I kind of wish I would have been, more balanced and everything. Where Tony, he's operating at an inferiority complex. He has to let everybody know that he's the richest, the best looking, the most talented. But all that comes from his fear and what happened to his parents and having to try to prove
Mm.
something. And I think that's what's key at the end of Endgame is he finally goes, okay, I'm okay with who I am. I don't have to tell anybody anything. And that's where obviously I love Luke wins across the board, but I connect with Tony.
I love it. I love that answer. All right, we have two left here, a little more serious. So,
And by the way, I can prove it because I've got my
oh, there
these,
you go.
these are official Tony Starks.
That's
So
awesome. That is so awesome. Awesome stuff. All right, slightly more serious here in these last two questions, but
yeah,
when it comes to the mind and the fitness of the mind, what is the best book on the topic you have read and would recommend to people?
Happiness Trap. The Happiness Trap by Dr. Russ Harris. Across the board, the book changed my life.
Mm, okay. Gonna have to make sure I check that out myself. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah, there's
then,
also videos on YouTube if you're not some people aren't a reader or don't have
mhm.
time. There's great clips. The Happiness Trap by Dr. Russ Harris.
All right, I'll definitely have to check that out. Thanks for that. And then finally, we end with this. Complete this sentence. When you master your mind,
You optimize your joy.
man, you did really well. Those last two, yeah, I love it. I tell people I had a guest earlier in the week, and I said, I feel like the first question I blew it past you, strike one, but then I can't strike you out because your next two or three were really good. All your answers were great. But your last two really, really, I really love the last two, especially the last one. So, um, last thing, where should people look for you at, Dustin?
www.mindmaxed.com. Be sure and type in maxed, Maxed. Mind Max is not me, but Mind Maxed with the ED is me.
All right.
Yeah, so totally check it out there. And then also I'm, pretty active on LinkedIn. Dustin Dean, the Dean of Zen. I think there's a couple Dustin Deans, but if you do Dustin the Dean of Zen Dean, that's me. And I'd just love for you to reach out and eventually work together. And I also have some like exciting technologies coming in the future, which I can't say too much about that, but maybe that can maybe you can invite me back.
Episode two.
Episode 2, there we go.
There, there,
Return
there,
of the Jedi. Let's call it Return of the Jedi.
there we go. Episode two. And for everyone listening there, I will make it easy for you all. I'll have the links down in the show notes there that you can click and find Dustin extremely easily. But yeah, after this conversation, I believe we definitely will have an episode two. Um, the record you're chasing is, and I just talked to him the other day. It'll be airing soon, but probably will have aired after, maybe before after. I'm not sure of the schedule yet. But I have a Beatle historian. I'm so into the Beatles, but David Bedford is the leader in the clubhouse with 3 appearances so far on the Bare Essentials. I told him that I probably have to send him a trophy or something. But yeah, no,
That's awesome.
Dustin, this has been great. I knew this was going to really produce a lot of valuable insights and nuggets. I hope people enjoy this as much as I did. Um, Biggest compliment I'll give to you, Dustin, right now is beyond your expertise in the field. I just would say this to everybody, and I think if you haven't got it out of this episode, you will as you look at some of his content and follow him closer. I think Dustin is infectious, and he actually is authentic and he just listen. That's why I want to surround myself with in my own circle. So thank you for that, and I hope that people find this as valuable as I did. So Dustin, thank you again.
Thanks so much, Charles. It's been amazing, man. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been fun, and as always, I am super grateful and appreciative of everyone who decided to tune in and watch this. I'd like to say I probably wouldn't have a show if I didn't have people watching, but you know what? I feel like I'm selfish. I love these conversations. I might do it if nobody watched it, but I think it helps that people watch. So thanks again, everyone. Talk to you all soon. Keep tuning in for more real, authentic conversations. Dustin, good luck with everything you got going. Looking forward to seeing what the future holds. Take care.
May the force be with you all.
Great, great, right on. Awesome.
This
Thanks,
has been
Dustin.
the Bare
Bye.
Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.